Okay, so I may be streaming now. All right, cool. I'm live. All right, technical difficulties slightly. This is our first time streaming on YouTube, but I think we're good to go now. And so what I'm gonna do is switch back to that. Oh wait, I keep not trying to show my chats. Hang on. Okay, cool. All right, so yeah, so this is new, as you can see, a new endeavor. But what we're gonna do is basically take an hour each week, or possibly in the future, even Mark and I each take an hour, and just kind of show what we're building, whatever it happens to be. So it's pretty unstructured, and we can walk through not just like what we're building and how we're building it, but you can see hopefully some of our like thought process that goes behind and how we do things, and the challenges and the trial and error that we go through, which is basically standard in building. So we thought it was a really cool way to show what it's like to actually build, and at the same time show what it's like to build in Bildr, which is different than like coding per se, although a lot of the concepts are the same, and kind of just show all that, but like pretty unstructured. So today, being the first one, I have like a random task that I happen to be in the middle of on the Bildr studio itself in this new release. So what's cool about this one is that I'm gonna show a lot of sneak peeks, I guess. There's right now we're looking at the current studio, but we're in the middle of a release where we're redesigning large chunks of it and doing some new stuff. And so we'll actually get to show it off a little bit here early. It's the first time outside of Bildr, I think, that anyone is seeing it. So I'll just start in, and basically one last thing to say is this will go about an hour, unless maybe it's like 40-50 minutes in and it makes sense to wrap up. I'll just wrap it up. So yeah, and actually another thing is, maybe before I start, let me just see if I can pull this up so that I can watch comments, because right now I'm kind of disconnected. I can't actually see anything that's going on. I'm just speaking into a void, but I see. I'm gonna play it. It's gonna play myself there. Okay. So I think I can see the chat now, although I'm not sure. There's nothing in it yet. But if I do see something pop up in there, I'll try to answer it. If not, if Mark or Cora or anyone from Bildr's watching and you want to chat me in Slack if there's something important, I can get to. Oh, cool. There's the chat. All right. Sweet. So let me pull this chat window down to here. Sorry for the confusion, a little bit of slowness to start, but it's the first day. All right. So, like I said a minute or two ago, I'm in the Bildr project. And so if you don't know, Bildr is built with itself, or we maintain it with itself. So right now you can see the studio is open, but the actual pages in the studio are the studio itself, which is crazy. It's sometimes really confusing to work in, although I'm pretty used to it at this point. So what you can see here specifically is a new header bar. So what we've done is we've kind of consolidated some of the buttons and menus that are everywhere. And so one thing you'll see in a second is we got rid of this left-hand menu. Got rid of these buttons on the top here, got rid of this stuff here. We did a single unified header across the whole top of the studio. I might as well just show that, I guess. So here's an example of what the new studio with no menu slid in will look like. So you can see there's basically like a standard kind of computer menu now up here, which we found out was actually pretty useful. So now most of the things you want to do, if you can't find them in the interface, they're going to be up here in an element. And so these are in a menu options. These things will gray out and enable and disable as appropriate. So if I'm selected on like a flow, for example, the flow one is here. And then if I'm selected on an action, the action lights up. So pretty cool. I don't know. I'm not going to go too far into it. Just kind of wanted to mention it since it's new and everyone's seeing it. You can also notice there's a slight design update in here. Nothing major. We're going to roll this out over time. So this first update, We did kind of a big one with these headers, but a lot of the other stuff in the studio is exactly the same. And actually, I think all of the functionality in the studio is 100% the same. So what I'm going to do right now is part of another new thing. So we redid this header for the actual studio itself, but we also created like a dashboard section for opening projects. So instead of that white menu that slides down with the projects listed out, it's going to be something like this. It's probably not going to look like this with these images. This is all in progress. What these will be in practice for projects will be an actual like screenshot of your homepage, whatever the homepage route is. I think, as long as we still like that after we see it. But yeah, basically I've got projects here, and we've got a new tab here for education and one for community. And so we're going to kind of pull education and community into this dashboard-like interface. So right now, if I click on education, we've got a few things that are popped in here. And the way this works, or the way we're working this right now, is Mark is a step ahead of me building all of this functionality. So he's created like a new system where we've got lessons, which are kind of bite-sized, smaller individual things, and then a way to wrap those lessons up into courses that can be like longer form, bigger things. And so like Bildr fundamentals, you know, it'll have several videos rather than like the lessons might just be one bite-sized video. We're kind of breaking it up that way, and we're also allowing others to, we're putting the system in place for others to create lessons and that kind of thing. So it should be pretty powerful when it's all done. And what you see right here is what Mark's doing is he's coming in here and he's creating all of the the back-end stuff. So he's creating the data collections and all the logic and like thinking through how this is going to work to allow people to post courses, allow people to have access to them, to edit them, to view them, to eventually put them on your profile, to eventually put them into a marketplace. There's all these steps. And as he's doing that, he's building it in a certain way. And it looked a little different from this at first, but I'm coming in behind him and just designing out some of the stuff. And I'm not changing too much usually, but sometimes making like UX, you know, some bigger changes, and then we'll go back and forth kind of thing. For today, I started doing some of this top stuff and setting up some of like the structure of this education homepage. But for today, I thought maybe I'd go into these individual cards and actually think through what should a course card look like? What should a lesson card look like? What should an office hours card look like? And you can see Mark already thought through some of the stuff. He's pretty far into it, and it's pulling real data and all that. So for my end, it's more thinking like, okay, does it make sense to have an icon and a title underneath? Does it make sense to be this size? Does it make sense for these to be the same size? You know, that kind of thing. So I think that's what I'll do. And I'll probably just dive in and get started. I don't see anything crazy in the comments, although they're kind of half cut off for me, but it looks like we're good to go. So yeah, so like I said, the first thing I want to start on is probably these courses cards. There's two separate ones. There's a courses card and a lesson card. And I'm not sure exactly, like I haven't thought through initially on the lesson card yet, but I have thought of one thing I want to try in the course card, which is essentially highlighting the title, you know, the title in the center with a smaller icon rather than this bar in the bottom. So that's one thing. And then another thing is some of the other parts of the design are less rounded on the corners. So I want to try to match the design a little bit. And then lastly, I might mess with the actual spacing of these. And I kind of like how it is now. It's using CSS Flexbox to just show standard sized cards. And if the screen's wider, it'll line more of them up. And if it's smaller, it'll stack them. That's probably the best solution, but I did want to just play around with maybe making these cards stretch out and fill the whole window, or maybe do something else. So we'll see if I even get to that. So yeah, so let's see. What I'll do is I'll head back into the header, and the cards are part of this dashboard workspace. And I already know that, but essentially I'm going to come into workspaces and like I can just search dashboard because I know the cards are in there. I could look for specifically for like, it's probably this course card. What I actually usually do is just go to the main dashboard page and then find it from there. So this will load a dashboard workspace that mostly Mark's been in, but I've been in a little bit. So I've been in here doing some design on the dashboard page itself. But in this case, I'm going to come down to the education page, So you can see here's that courses, or here's that education homepage with the courses, the lessons. So here's courses and lessons. And I'm gonna do these courses cards. So if I come to this grid and I just click go to child page, it'll take me right here to this courses row. And so I guess before I make any changes, I can talk through what you're looking at here, which is essentially we've got that grid that's going to display as many of these courses as are in the data. So right now it's showing 3 from the data. That could change based on the data, but it'll just repeat this page, this row page. And on this row page, on the page body, there's a class right here. And so we have, so the Bildr styles are wild. Like it's not even loading as fast as I'm scrolling here. Like there are a million styles potentially in the Bildr Studio. So we have basically an internal naming system. It's not nothing tight. It's a little bit loose, but you can see here that Mark has created this class called Education 922 Main Courses Course Row Outer LI. And that to me tells me exactly what it is. So I know exactly what that class is. And I can see all the styles that he's applied to make it look like this. And then inside of here, there's a div for outer, which has a click event on it already to open the course into its own page. So he's taking care of all that functionality. I don't have to worry about that. And then it looks like he's just got a div for the image on top, which if you remember was these icons, and a course name on the bottom. And so if we look through the flows, every page starts with a page load. That's the first thing that's going to trigger. So on this page load, all it's doing is running page binding. So I look at page binding, there's an action to set the name of the course into this element here, an action to set the image into this element here, and then an action to set the background color of the outer div. And I'm not totally even sure why that does that right there, but there's probably a reason. You know, I can't exactly tell what's going on yet. And then this is an action that will set the link. So when you click on it, it'll open the course itself. What's interesting about this, so we have an action that's set to this outer where if you click it, it's going to open the course. What I'm seeing in here with this set interaction action is that Mark has put an actual A tag in here and used an action to set the href attribute, to set the link attribute. And what's notable, the reason I'm noting this is because this is like, if you want to make something that's good for SEO and good for screen readers and that kind of thing, you want to do something like this, where you create a true A tag, which is like semantic HTML that has a true href attribute. Just makes it easier for like Google crawlers and stuff. So we'll often do stuff like this behind the scene where you might not expect, you might think in your head it makes sense to go do an action on click, but that action's all JavaScript, and Google can actually pick those up. It's not like it can't find them, but we like to make it as easy as possible for Google. And there's a few other benefits to using a true A tag too. Like if they hold Apple on a Mac and click that A tag, it'll open in a new tab. So we try to capture as much of that as possible when we build. So just wanted to mention, because I saw this action in here, I actually don't even know where the A tag is on the page or anything like that yet. And let me just check really quickly because I heard a chat. Oh, okay. So that's cool. So Mark just chatted me because I was talking about that background color, and he said he'd originally started setting something up where we'd have a background color for each like type of course or something like that. So I assume that this action here, it's like saying, it's saying set the background color property, the background color style, to a value from the database. And so that database is probably like the type of course it is or that kind of thing. So we may or may not get to that, or it may not make it into this round of updates. I'm not even sure. Depends like what it is and how many courses we're going to launch with. But that's what that is, I guess. So anyway, for me, I don't really need to worry about most of that stuff. It's good for me now. I know what's going on basically in there. What I want to do is start to do some styles. And the main things that I think make sense to start with would be to not use this bright white yet. I might use it because on the project dashboard, these used to be all black. And then when I came in with, or all dark gray, when I came in and put a light image, this is basically like saying no image. It's just a blank studio. When I came in here, I kind of liked how they pop. So maybe we'll end up putting something light back in. But in general, the whole theme, the whole new theme is based on these dark grays, and it's a dark theme. So that's one thing that I think off the bat I'm going to change. And to change that, I'm guessing it's going to be this main outer. So this is a grid row page. It's running inside of a grid list element. So if you put a class on this page body, it's going to get applied to the LI in code. So if you know code, the grid element is a UL, and then inside of it, it's got an LI for each row page. The primary style class on page body of a row page really in code means it's adding that class to the LI. So that's super useful to know. And sort of funny story, I just found that out yesterday. It's been in the studio for like a year, and I thought you couldn't control the style on the LI, and I always need to. So I do a lot of like custom JavaScript workarounds. It's really awesome. You can do a workaround in Bildr, but it was always annoying. And I just found out for like the last year or maybe more, I could have just been putting a primary style class on the page body. It's a good tip if you don't know it. But yeah, I'll come in here. I did change one thing in here the other day. I kind of just like touched on this a little bit. I wanted to make the cards smaller and see what they looked like. So I actually came in here and I didn't want to mess with the height and width settings that Mark had put originally because I wasn't sure, like I wasn't really going in there. So I actually came into the CSS and did these comments and commented out a few of styles that he added. So it's pretty interesting because you can do that in the CSS. It's sort of a weird thing, but you just add that little comment. If you're in the use props, you can still see these properties come in, but like true to code, they're not going to display because they're commented out. The other thing I could do is like, I could have just created a brand new class, and maybe I will, or maybe I won't, I'm not sure. Could have just created a brand new class and used that, copied all these styles to start from. Because these are so simple, really, I could have just deleted these old ones. But before, I'm kind of like Mark, he'll go in and delete stuff, no problem. He's fast with that. And if he needs to bring it back, he just goes, sets it all up. I'm a lot more cautious with it, or I like to hide stuff or comment stuff, or I like to move stuff. I move whole flows into a staging, or whole actions into a staging flow sometimes to like keep them as backup. So that's just a little quirk I do, but no real reason to do that normally, but if you wanted to, you can. So yeah, so I came in and I originally had changed the width from 400 to 300 and the height from 300 to 240. And that was to match the size of these dashboard cards. So they're actually the same. I don't know if that makes sense or not, and really it might make sense that maybe the courses cards are bigger and the lesson cards are that size or something like that. That's just what I did to try the other day. And that's how it is now. So today I'll go in and like further explore that basically. So yeah, so min width 400 and a width 400 I don't even need, so I actually know I can get rid of that. And actually let me go back. I don't need to work in this CSS view. So I normally work in this used props view. I see a lot of people on office hours and when we help people that use this all props view. It's the same outcome, but because I know CSS, it's much easier for me to just see only the properties that I have set, and then for me to come up here to new property and just type whatever I want. Not everyone can do that, but hopefully if you use the all props for a little bit of time, you can start to come into this use props because it is a lot faster than hunting through and finding everything. But also all props is a great failsafe for when you're not sure what the property is, you can come in here and find it. So I think what I'm going to do first is look for, so there's a few things actually. I see there's a box shadow on here, and I was going to look for that background color, which looks like it's not on this div. It might be on this outer div. Oh, and you'll see this bug here. When I roll over, sometimes it's popping that preview out. It's a super annoying bug that popped up in the last release, and it's fixed now because we completely changed the menu. So it's gone whenever we release next, but currently we're in this state where this is live in production. If this is ever a huge problem for you, especially if you don't need to use that preview menu, I usually come in here and I inspect that preview menu. And then when it loads, sorry, my screen's really shrunk. There we go. So when it loads, I can come into here and do display none. And now until I refresh the studio, that window's not popping up anymore. So if that's really bothering you, maybe that can help. And it doesn't work here now. Like, oops, I click preview. If I click on that drop down, it's not going to show me them because I just display none'd it. But like I know what the URLs are, so I don't actually need that right now. So anyway, got rid of that, and I'm just gonna look. I'm on this outer div now. I'm just gonna look at what styling's on here. Again, you can sort of see that naming convention: education-922 main course row outer. If I come in here, there's that background color, and so I don't know what I want to do exactly, but I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start from the same or very similar styles to the project card and then make it distinct from the project card, but still kind of the same idea. So what I can do, it's in this workspace. So I'll just go over to it in this workspace. So here's the project card. And this has a lot more elements, but similar thing. It's probably got a style on the page. It's just got a font over it in the page body. So this project outer, project card outer class is what's defining those styles. What I can do, what I would normally do, and since this is just me building, I'll do it right now. I come into CSS and copy all that CSS from that one class, and then find this new page to the class I want to edit. And so what I do in this scenario is I come into the CSS, I leave what's there, leave a few spaces, paste all the new CSS, and then kind of reconcile it. So for example, the stuff that's there, color, height and width of 100%, which I'll probably, well actually I won't end up keeping color, but I'll probably keep that height and width, so I can go like delete this new width. I don't see a height in there. Keep all those. Keep that flex stuff. And in this case, this is a good example too of like, I don't exactly know what Mark's doing with the flex stuff, but I don't want to mess. I want to make sure I don't mess with that because that's his style. So for now, I'm just going to leave all that. And then this background color is what I don't need. And I can comment it like that. That way, if I want to bring it back, it's really easy to get that exact shade. But for now, it's that. And then the rest of these styles, if I keep them in here like this, they'll overwrite whatever's above them. That's true to CSS rules. So that's kind of cool anyway, but what I try to do is make sure I don't double the style. So I'll just look through and padding and margin, good, border, good. Here's that smaller border radius, which I don't see a border radius on here, but I know something's giving it a larger one, so I'll have to make sure I replace that correctly. And then I don't think I need these. So these are like specific flex classes, which may not apply in the same way. He's already got the layout in there, so I'm actually going to remove all these. I can keep that gap because that won't hurt anything. Keep that. Keep the transition. Here's a height. Direction column I don't need a commented out background color, but this is the background color I want. That's that dark gray. Overflow, text decoration's already up there. And then this makes it not selectable. Seems useful. So I think that's good. So if I do that and save CSS, now that's updated a little bit. And if I come into the education here, it's already, you can see it's updated down here. Basically, it's kind of hard to tell because some of these have images. But I still have, I think, a larger radius than I want. And I still have that light color down there. So first, I'm going to check this outside class and see if that has a border radius, which I'm guessing it will. So border radius of 0.5 em. So again, like to preserve this, I could come in here and do this like that, but I actually I'm not going to preserve it in this case. I'm just going to go delete it. Okay, so that probably fixed the border radius to what I want. And then down here on the course name, it's got its own style. Again, same naming convention, but this one's course row title. And course row title has this background color here. I'm just going to see what this looks like to comment out. I actually don't want to have a background color on it. I want it to show through to the background behind it. Okay. And then I'm going to want to not use, so since I changed the background to dark gray, I don't want to keep the color as black. So I saw that in this outer class. So right here, I think actually I could probably just use inherit here. So you can also set a CSS property to inherit, which is essentially like clearing it or removing it. Kind of like sets it to whatever its closest ancestor, closest parent, I don't know what you call that, what that would have a color set. So that, I might need to set that to white specifically. And I'm just refreshing every once in a while. You know, Bildr will update everything live. Every once in a while, if something doesn't update, I just make sure by refreshing. Yeah. So here, I'll just explicitly set this. And what I do, what I've been doing so far in the studio is instead of using pure white, I've been using like a 0.8 or a 0.9 opacity white. So I did RGBA, which is red, green, blue, alpha. 255s on red, green, blue is what makes white. And then that 0.8 is the transparency, the alpha. So if I did that, that looks looking pretty good. I might do a 0.9 instead, but I don't need to mess with that now. And then, yeah, so that looks good. And then the only difference, just to get it kind of baseline to the projects, is I believe the projects have a hover on them. So let's just see what that is and pull that in. So it's changing the bottom, it looks like. So I think, let's see, go over to that page, find this child page. And here on this, the original class that I copied from, I just copied these main styles, but I can see right here, it's got some hover styles as well. They're separate, you know, because I did a copy paste of the CSS. The CSS that I copied was only for default. So if I go to hover here, it's got its own CSS, which looks like a commented out background color and then a new background color. So instead of copying that whole thing, I'll just set this up manually. And then I just want to check and make sure there's no more states on here. So now, head back to, I almost couldn't find it because it's not off-white anymore. So go back to here, and I think that was the outer class that had the background. Yep. So the hover here, I'll just add a new property for background color, paste. So now it's got that hover, and here, I'll come back to that after it loads. It'll have that hover. All right, so now I would say it's kind of like baseline where I want to start from. And it looks like this now. I think one thing is, I don't know if, there's a drop shadow on the background of the outer class, so I don't know if that should be there. Like I feel like the projects don't have a drop shadow, but I'll go check in a second. So I'm thinking removing the drop shadow. But the main thing I'd like to try that I mentioned in the beginning is for these courses, because a course doesn't necessarily have an image. A course might have an icon like this. That's what we have now anyway. I think instead of highlighting this huge icon, I want to take the title, put it in the center, possibly put a little bit of a one-liner description on there if we have it in the database. And this is the kind of thing where if we don't have it in the database, but I think it's important, I'll talk to Mark about adding that in. Most of the time, something like that I would want, I'll go check, and he had already added it into the database. Like it's already in the data, and I just pull it and use it. But yeah, that's what I think I'll try first, is I'll center these words with a smaller icon above it. And so the way I'm going to do that is probably just to gut this entire thing, which you don't always normally do. Like a lot of times I'll just work in change styles here and there. But since this is set up in a specific way, I feel like it'd be really easy for me to just go in and flip it to a new way. So let me just double check what's on these classes. This is like a fun thing too, where I don't use Flex all that often, but the Bildr crew uses Flex a lot. So I always have to come in and kind of figure out, okay, what's this Flex actually doing here? Like usually for me, if I see Flex and Flex direction column, it's the same as block. It's not technically, like there are differences, but I'm always like, okay, what does it need here? But it looks like what I can do is actually take this whole outer class and put a display grid and a place item center, which will do exactly what I want. I just want to check one last thing and make sure there's nothing on the outer class. It's going to hurt me. Yeah, that looks all good. All right, sweet. So here, again, if I want to preserve his styles, I could do something like this. Comment out display flex and come back in with my own display grid and like that. Or I could have just gone in here and changed it, you know. Right here, it was set like this. I could have just changed it like that. And then because I'm set on grid now, these flex direction properties, they don't affect the CSS. They don't affect the element. It's just a CSS thing. So I can just leave that. I don't need to delete them yet. And what I'll do, to be clear, is after I get it set up how I want, I'll come back in and clean all this up. But as I'm building, I like to keep the pieces there so that I'm never too far away, especially because there's no undo. So if you're someone that hates how we have no undo, which I used to be, and I'm very used to it now, but I used to hate it. It used to like really bother me. You can do stuff like this to sort of like ease your mind. Anyway, display grid, and then there's this property that's actually doesn't come up automatically in Bildr called place items. It's just not in our menu of properties, but Bildr will accept anything you type here. So if if you type it and it's a valid CSS property, it'll work. So I use this a lot, place items. It used to not have good browser support, but now it does. And essentially what it is a shortcut to say align items middle and justify content middle, which will, if you have display grid, it'll take whatever is inside of that grid and center it vertically and horizontally. So I do place items center. And then I have two elements that are inside of this grid element. But in order to center everything and then keep everything inside of that normal display block, I usually add like a container div. So I'll just come in here, hit add, choose a div, and then put both these divs, well, one div and one heading inside of that div. So now this outer is grid, this inner is centered. And so right now it'll be a little bit of the ways towards what I want, but it won't look perfect. So yeah, you can see it's more, it's like the icon and the words are centered. The words here have padding or margin maybe around and a tiny drop shadow. I'm not sure if that drop shadow is coming through in the live stream, but I don't need it. So in here, get rid of that box shadow, get rid of that padding, margin 0 is good. These properties basically don't matter, so I'll just keep those like that. And then that sets up roughly to what I want, but the icon I think is too big. Did my mouse die? Oh, I thought my mouse died. So I'm gonna look at how this image is sized. So we've got course row icon, which has a height of 100 pixels. I think that like in this case, I don't need any of these styles basically. It doesn't need to be display flex or anything like that, but I also don't need to change that. There's no reason for me to change that. So if I wanted to make this smaller, I could pretty much just come in here and maybe we'll do like a height of 40. Oh, that didn't work. I might just do it my own way. Let's see if there's any styles on this image. Oh, width of 70, that's why. So that just has an explicit height and width, and it's, you know, I usually only explicitly set one, or I actually try to never explicitly set things in pixels. Almost always I'll set things with M or percentage. In this case, for a small icon, it's my one exception where I often do use pixels. So what I might do for now, I'm just going to remember this style. It was main course row icon in case I need to add it back, and I'll just remove it. So like that obviously stays, or I shouldn't say obviously, but that class stays in Bildr. So if I need it, I can just add it back from here. But for now, it's off the element. And then on this, instead of a width of 70, we'll just give it a width of maybe like 25. Let's see what that looks like. And I think I do need to refresh. When I change specific things, they disappear. So for this one, I'll need to refresh. Nice. So now the flex properties I said a second ago, I wasn't sure what they were for. That's probably what was centering it. But in this case, I'll center it in a slightly different. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? Well, I don't know. So this is another good example of me just messing around, because I haven't really thought through. This is all on the fly. I'm kind of like designing on the fly and thinking about things. So I was thinking for a second, maybe I'll put this icon before the words, but also I'm not sure what else is going to be in here. Like if I want to do the title and a byline if we have it. So before I go too far, you know, moving that to the side, let me think about what I want to do. And I think the first thing I'll do is I'm going to find what information I have on this card. So in Bildr, we need to make a proper debugger so that you can do this yourself. But if you know how, you can do a lot of pretty in-depth debugging yourself. And I can find what variables I have on this page, which essentially means what data fields, like what columns in the database I have available to use. And if there's one in there for like a description or a byline, I'll use it. And if not, I'll figure something else out. So if I inspect on this element, this is super tricky and random. So, and I think actually we do have a video on it, but if you ever need to do this and you can't remember how, just ask us in Discord and we'll talk you through. But I do set global variable on one of the items in this page, gives me a temp1 variable. And then I can do temp1 dot browser object dot browser form underscore vars, never know how to say that. And I can basically see here a list of all the variables and their values that are on this page. So Bildr fundamentals with a dash is probably the URL slug. Maybe that's like the full URL up there. Here's that background color that we were talking about in the beginning that may or may not get used. Created by user ID, created date, the ID of the record. All right, so here's a description of some sort it looks like. If I hold my mouse over this, I can see it's not too long, but it's like kind of long for a card. And I don't see another sub line or anything. So I guess my choice here would be I could start this description, give it like a certain amount of space or maybe 1 or 2 lines worth and put a dot, dot, dot. Or I could do maybe I would design something with text that says like description goes here and then talk to Mark about getting this added into our data structure and our admin for adding these courses. For now, just to see what it looks like, I might try to just pop this in here and see what happens. So this is a variable I can use with this name, this variable name, which is the ID of the column in the database. But what I'm going to do is add in a text paragraph. And normally you can come to this data tab and bind it right here. You can select the database, the data collection, and select a field. And sometimes I've seen that work in the Bildr project, but since it's so old, I guess, and some things aren't up to date, like sometimes it doesn't work. So in the Bildr project, we often stay away from this data tab just to be a little safer. But normally you just go in there. In this case, I'm going to come into the page binding and use an action to do it. I'm just going to take this set name one and duplicate it and call it set description. So I'll just select my new element and use that new variable. And then before I preview this, zoom in here. This element I just added, so this course name, if I look at the properties, the display text is blank. It's showing nothing. The element I just added is the display text says text box. So if I ran this, you might see text box and all these before the name pops in. So it's a little safer to either go blank or you could do like a dash or some other kind of placeholder. But in this case, I think blank is cool. And then let's see what this looks like. It's going to be too much text at first, but I like to go in steps. I can close this off. So there's that, and it looks like only that one has the description. So let's see. So I don't know if I'll end up using this, but I do kind of want to see, something that gives you a little more information in these cards, so you know what you're clicking on. Basically, that's my goal. That's what I'm going for. But I know this is too much. If I did this one line with a dot, 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 I'm not sure if it'll do the trick, right? It would say a comprehensive course to get you dot, dot, dot. Maybe this whole thing is just irrelevant. Maybe I'll come back to this and worry about those. I'll talk to the rest of the team and see what they want to do. And if we want to put those in, I'll come back to them. So for now, I don't need this element. And I don't need this action. I do want to do a little bit of styling. Like I want to make it feel good in my head. So I think for now, let me see where I did. So on this image that I put a width of 25 pixels, it's left aligned because an image is inline block. By default, it's not display block, it's display inline block. And so it's taking the alignment of its parent, which is left aligned. So it's left aligned compared to these words. But what I'm going to do, and this is like a little trick I use often on images, is I go display block, margin left, and margin right both set to auto. And as long as you have display block a width, then margin left and right auto will center something. So that's that. And then one thing I've been doing throughout the whole design, as I've been sort of like cleaning up design stuff, is I've been toning down a lot of these headers. Like this course's header, I want it to be nice and bold, but these headers here don't really need to be that bold. So on this course name, I know it has a class already. I'll just come in here and add a font weight and see if I can wrangle it down a little bit. What we've got, which is really cool, is we're using this font Rubik, which is the font from our logo, but also it's a really good, like useful, like utilitarian font for inside of the studio, and it's a variable weight font. So I can use any font weight from 300 to 9, or maybe from 200 to 900, and anywhere in between. Like I could do a font weight of like 491 if I wanted. So it gives me a ton of flexibility, especially in the studio with playing with font weights, which from a design perspective, it's like often overlooked. I feel like a lot of, if you're not a trained designer, you're usually not thinking in font weights, but it's like a super important design tool. And it's something that you can really control, like hierarchy and experience. So I'm almost always trying to get all the weights custom and just right. But I'm gonna start this at 300 and see how it looks like. So like I think that's not the look I'm going for, and it kind of blends in with everything else too much. So maybe this won't work out well, or maybe I'll need like a box around this or something. Because right now, if I look at this whole page, these aren't standing out to me. You know, that's not doing it for me. And I don't know, so something like this would work to stand out if I had an image, but I don't know if these are gonna have images. So for me, it's like, okay, what can I do now to kind of like add something to this or make these more interesting? One thing would be some spacing out in here. Another thing, I might try some letter spacing actually, which is sort of a random one, but something I just feel like it might need. Another thing is, yeah, maybe a box, like I was saying, inside. So there's kind of a box inside of a box. But, you know, really, I'm actually not sure. Kind of looking at it like, And this is another good example of where ultimately I might go back to how Mark had it. Like I might just put this title back in the bottom bar. Not yet, because I feel like the top space in here was not being used. Like there wasn't enough in there. Whereas like here, I would keep these like this probably because it makes sense. But yeah, I mean, maybe the icon's too small. Maybe it needs some spacing. So I could do this. The icon size I'll do in here. But I can put a margin bottom on the image. I can put a margin bottom on this outer div. I can put a margin top on this course name. It really doesn't matter which. In this case, I'll just try a 1M margin, which is sort of like standard. Got to refresh for that image. And I see in the chat that Mark said we should have a short and long description. So I think that would probably be useful just to have a quick short description here. So maybe I'll type something in there hard-coded for now, and we can just see what it looks like visually. See, I actually think these icons are too big. I don't really know how useful they are, but they're the only visual we have right now for these. So that's another thing too, is maybe we decide, okay, it's important to actually get a visual. Like maybe we make it a requirement internally that every course has to have a visual. The reason I didn't go there at first is because we want users to create courses. And anytime you get like a user is creating stuff, you just want to make everything as easy as possible by default. Like you don't want to require a user to go create a custom image after they've already created their course, because that's just adding another hurdle to like getting it live and sharing. So the best thing would be if these all work with minimal effort, and then maybe you can layer on details if you want. But I would like to set these up where we don't need an image, but we'll see. For now, I'm going to leave the course name as it is. I do want to play with that typography, but I'll add back this description, and maybe like for this one, it's like, or maybe we'll go like this. This doesn't matter. It's just placeholder for length and for just seeing what it looks like. So something like that. And what I can do is I want this all to be centered. So I might as well just come to the outer class and center everything like this. which by the way, this actually, if I would have done this without the display block and margin autos, if I would have just done that, it would center the image automatically. So that's what that looks like. So now I can see clearly hierarchy-wise, this title needs to be bolder, and the text either probably fine like that or it could be a little lighter. I think instead of making it lighter, I would want to make it a tiny bit smaller. So here's another thing is like if I'm just starting to play with this, I'm not like designing in Figma and coming in. I'm doing the design in Bildr, which is 80 or 90% of what I do these days. I'll start it all in inline styles. And then just because it's quicker and I don't have to think about what's the name for that class, how does it fit in, I don't think about any of that stuff. I just pop some inline styles, look at it visually. And then once I get it how I want or get it closer to finished, I'll copy all those styles using the CSS tab like I did earlier, paste them into an actual class. So for now, I think for this, I want the font size to be a bit smaller, like 0.8 em. And another thing I noticed while I'm in here is that I want some padding on this. Like I don't want these to go right up to the edge. Even though when it's smaller, they don't know if it had more words, it would go up to the edge. So maybe that's in here. Yeah, so there's already a padding in here. And I don't want to take up too much room, so I'm going to start with a 0.5 em. It's really just in case something hits the edge, it'll have a little buffer, but most of the time things will stay centered. It should be good anyway. And then I also, when you group two things together, like I don't want the space in between these. I want these almost touching. So one way that you can do that is you can set a margin bottom of 0 on the heading and then a margin top of 0 on the thing below it. You need to do them both because something called collapsible margins, which is just like a code thing. But the way it's going to collapse those margins, if you just did margin bottom 0 on the heading and didn't change what's below it, you wouldn't actually see a change visually. It's pretty confusing, but it's good to know that little quirk exists. I do one little shortcut there, which is I come to the thing at the bottom and I do a margin top of -1 em. Because a default margin on a p tag is 1 em on top and bottom. Almost always it's good to keep that. It really helps like readability and it helps when you're forming your HTML semantically, it really helps. But in this case, I want to get rid of that top margin and also get rid of the headings margin bottom without setting it, because I don't want to go set that everywhere. I just want to set one style. So that's a little trick there, is -1 em on the second element. Oh, too much. And probably the reason that happened is either this has a margin bottom of 0 already, which it does, yeah. So like for this, I could reset this basically to say 1 em. Or I could also remove this whole margin property and explicitly set just margin top. Maybe just to show it, I'll do that. It doesn't actually matter. It's not it's the same end result. But I only want the margin top of 1 em here, which means the margin bottom will take its default, which is already 1 em in HTML. So this looks a little better. And they're not touching because the 1 em, this font size is 0.8. So when I do a margin top of -1 em, it's actually -0.8 em, which is confusing, but that's not so bad. I mean, I'll look at it in a second pulled up, but maybe it's good to have a little space. So I might come back to that, but I can roughly, this isn't an exact mathematical conversion, I don't think, but I think if I did 1.2, it'll be a little closer. And actually, I like how it looks, so I'm just going to leave it like that. I think that's pretty good. What's cool about doing all this stuff also in ems, as a side note, is that for responsive, I can change the pixel font size on the base main page element. So I change the font size in one place. Since everything else I'm building is ems, the whole design will shrink and scale proportionally. So using ems is really beneficial when it comes to those like bigger systems or responsive design. So let's see. So let's put this course title a little bit bolder. So bold normally is a font weight of 700. My 1-year-old just walked in. Is a font size of 700 normally. I set it all the way down to 300, so I'm going to move this to like 400 and see how it looks. I mean, that's starting to look a little better. I'll still want to finesse it for sure, but it looks decent. But I still think I have that same problem where these cards aren't really standing out to me. Stop, buddy. So let me see. So I mean, we're almost at an hour. Here, let me give you it. we're almost at an hour, and I don't know exactly what I want to do. So maybe I'll even just call it for the day, because I don't want to just fumble around for 10 minutes for no reason. But I think the next step for me is like, okay, how can I make this stand out and be instantly recognizable that this is, if I need fundamentals, this is where I click. I guess too, maybe I could just check in on these comments. If there's any questions or anything anyone wants to see, I'd be happy to do it within the next 10 minutes so I can fill out the hour. Or if not, I can end it here as a inaugural episode. Let me see. Just pull these up. Just comments about the kid. Okay. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it seems like there's not really questions, but I really appreciate everybody watching. There you go. My wife closed the door. Really appreciate everybody watching, and hopefully that was kind of just getting our feet wet, and we'll get more interesting as time goes on. But I feel like I shared a few of my little secret tips, if you will. And it was pretty fun, and I got some work done. That's exactly what I would have been working on in this hour anyway. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, I think that's probably it. And cool. Yeah, Mark's liking the look so far, and we'll add the short description. I think that makes sense. And then yeah, like we'll keep it going, and maybe too, if you are watching and you have an idea of something I should try, feel free to chat that in Discord. I'll open to suggestions. But yeah, thank you. Thanks everyone.